everybody, Adam Tracy, and there's this huge misconception about offshore broker dealers, right? And I know from my experience in the securities world, especially with like small cap, micro cap, where clearing shares via like Rule 144 and the like was always like a big challenge for clients. And you'd always hear some blowhard say, "Well, I have this offshore broker dealer that clears everything, blah 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 blah." Well, that's all bullshit. So, securities licenses, right? I've talked about a lot of them, right? Anywhere offshore, uh, Vanuatu, Mauritius, BVI, any of those places, right? You can trade U.S. securities, but you can't directly place orders yourself because you are not registered as a broker dealer with the SEC, FINRA, and the like. So the way to do it is to form a partnership with what's called an executing broker, which is just a regular broker dealer. And there's many out there. They don't advertise this, right? But it's out there. And basically, you're routing your US equity trades through the executing broker. And you're able to do this under what's called Rule 156A, right? And as the offshore broker, securities dealer, you have the ability to solicit the clients, sell the trade, negotiate, do whatever you got to do, right? But at the end of the day, you're just passing that information along and placing the trade through the executing broker. And there's a lot of KYC, AML stuff that goes along with it, both for demanded by the executing broker, but then the executing broker has to basically redo it themselves anyway under law. And those trades are, settled through DTC and sit with the executing broker. And usually you can arrange some kind of omnibus custody arrangement, something like that. But at the end of the day, you can't place the trade as the offshore broker dealer. You can't liquidate the positions. You have to go back to the executing broker. And so that's how it works, right? And it works quite well if you can find an executing broker to do it. Now, part of the limitation of, being and relying under, working through what the Securities Act calls a chaperoning broker is that you cannot onboard U.S. persons, right? So if you have a U.S. person or U.S. UBO who wants to trade U.S. securities through his like BVI entity or something like that, you can't do that. Institutions are exempt, right? So if you have like institutions of a certain size, 5 million, yes, you can onboard them and place the trades through the executing broker. But rank and file U.S. persons, no matter how much money they have, can't do it, right? And so you go back to it and you think, how do you make money? Well, the biggest issue is how you get paid as the offshore broker because you have to avoid the appearance of engaging in like an unregistered broker dealer capacity. So if you think about how a broker dealer would work, in most cases, there's like a commission based on the size of the trade. Well, you can't really do that. Okay. So the models that apply between the executing broker and the offshore broker are like a service fee, an admin fee, or a flat fee, right? Where, it's per month or what have you, and it's X, right? Or even if you break it down by, size of trades and markets and stuff like that. So that is kind of the sticking point to a lot of it because at the end of the day, you're charging rather high commissions because you have to make money on your end. Now, of course, if you're dealing with an offshore broker and you want to gain access to US equity markets, you're probably willing to pay that commission, right? Because that's the whole point, and you're willing to do it. But for you as the offshore broker dealer, wherever you may be, right? And, you know, what's unique about it like if you compare it to correspondent banking and getting a bank license in some crazy place like Anjouan, right? It's very difficult to find that correspondent bank. Well, it's shockingly easy to find the executing broker. So whether it's Mauritius, Vanuatu, Seychelles, whatever crazy place you can find, and I think Mauritius and Vanuatu are in Seychelles for them are actually great offshore licenses to get. You can always find that executing broker. But to make it profitable, because of course your clients are going to want access to US markets, you have to be wary of how that fee is structured and you have to be prepared to charge relatively high commissions on your end because obviously there's a middleman involved, aka your executing broker. So that is how offshore securities dealers gain access to US markets for their clients. So if you have questions, you need introductions to executing brokers, anything like that, you know where to find me, Adam at adamtracy.io, and I will talk to you next time. Cheers.